Hey everybody, Mr. Bress here. And this is the first video in our series on the evolution unit. And so in this first video, and along with the other ones, I'm just going to kind of follow along the slideshow that we're going to be doing in class day by day. And also fill out the note guide that goes along with the lecture. And that's to help you kind of organize the ideas that we've talked about in class. So let's get started here. I'm gonna open up this, the slideshow here. And I'm going to present this slideshow. All right, so in this unit, I'm going to try to tell a story a little bit about, instead of just giving you facts about evolution, I'm going to try to tell a story about how do we as scientists, as humans, what is the evidence for evolution? How do we know that this theory is true? And how has it been tested? What have scientists done to convince themselves that life has evolved on the planet? One thing that I want to mention, there's a Google form that we're going to fill out in class, so I won't go over that as much here. And one thing I want to start with here is that there's many religious leaders across a number of faiths believe that the theory of evolution is compatible or consistent with the teachings of their faith. And I have a few quotes from religious leaders here, from the Dalai Lama to the Pope to archbishops in Atlanta to the Rabbinical Council of America, all of which are saying basically that yes, science has shown that life on this planet has evolved, but that doesn't take away from how life was created, or in some of these religious views, the role that humans play on Earth. And what they say, what I also believe is that questions of faith and questions of science are trying to answer different questions, right? The pursuit of scientific discovery and really diving into your faith and the texts around your faith are trying to answer two different questions. And many of these thoughtful people across a wide range of religions have acknowledged that and have acknowledged what scientists have found and the evidence that they found, and are able to kind of hold both of those ideas, their faith and the role of their God, as well as science, and hold those together. So I just wanted to present that here, because I know sometimes in some of the popular media, those two things can be seen as pitted against one another. And I think people that have been thoughtful in this can hold both of those simultaneously. So I'm not going to go too much more into that. I just wanted to offer that before we move on. Okay, so we're going to start with really, how old is the Earth, right? And so if we're talking about how life has maybe evolved on the planet, it's a good idea to try to figure out how old is the Earth. And one of the first, or more famous first people to kind of come to a conclusion was Archbishop James Ussher of Ireland. And in the mid 1600s, Archbishop Ussher went meticulously through the Bible and added up the lifespans of all of the people that were featured in the Bible, and put together that lifespan, and found that the Earth was something like, at that time, 6,400 and something years old. And he concluded that the Earth was formed on October 23rd, 4004 BC. You know, I think we'll see that scientifically we don't think that anymore. Anyone who's studied this doesn't think that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. But I will say that the historical accuracy and what Archbishop Ussher went through and the different texts that he brought in for that to account for kings that were referenced in the Bible and other texts when they were known to be around was an amazing work of putting history together from a number of different sources. It's just that we now, whatever this is, almost 400 years later, have developed some other techniques scientifically to sort of challenge his initial date that he set, but in no way diminish the historical work that Archbishop Ussher put into this. So let's keep moving on. So one thing that after this was thought, like the originally hypothesized that, okay, the Earth is 6,000 years old, Robert Hooke sort of was thinking, well, there's all these sort of layers in these rocks. And even in Robert Hooke's time, there was fossils known. And people started thinking, well, gosh, how would these layers of rock get formed and how long would they take to get formed? We don't really see them formed in our lifetime. And it just doesn't seem like they could be laid down in that amount of time. So the questions about the age of the Earth really started in the late 1600s, early 1700s, where others started questioning, well, maybe the Earth is a lot older than we originally gave it credit for. And so we're going to use science to determine the age of the Earth. And so here's my little puns here. Let's get rooted in science. Don't want to go too far out on a limb with scientific roots. Ring the bell of science and make sure we're barking up the right tree. Ha ha. That's right, because we're going to start with trees. So this evolution unit is going to start in a kind of interesting way. We're going to start with trees. And these trees that you're looking at here are really old. I'm telling you that. This is the bristlecone pine, some of which are known to be more than 2,000 years old. I think maybe the oldest is close to 4,000 years old. And here's a giant sequoia, which can grow, can be aged many hundreds, if not 1,000 years old. So, but how do we know how old these trees are? And the one thing we know, and you probably have heard this before, is that we can count the rings of this tree. So I want to just, so what happens in the growth of a tree, as you've probably learned before, is that each year the tree grows is represented by one ring. And the reason for that is early in the season, the trees grow really fast. They grow wide, they take up water, nutrients, and most importantly, carbon dioxide from the air. They go through photosynthesis, make glucose, string that glucose together to make the wood, the fiber of the tree. And each year the tree grows. And early in the year, it grows very rapidly. And that's marked by this lighter portion right here. And then towards the end, late summer, fall into winter, the growth really slows down. And that's marked by this, the darkened spot. And that early and late growth combined gives us the feature of these rings. So we can count the rings and determine the age of this tree. So let's give that a try really quick. I'm going to hop over here to the iPad. And I'm going to try this really quickly here. And let's see how this goes. So I already have this loaded in Notability, but this is the Evolution Unit lecture guide. And I want to just look at here. So right here it says approximately how old was this tree when it was cut down, right? So this one is sliced through the middle. You can determine the age of trees without cutting them down. You can actually put a little bore into the tree and pull it out, and you can count the rings that way that come out in a small little cylinder without harming the tree all too much. But let's pull this up here. And I'm going to count these here. So I think this is the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I count 12 rings here. I think this tree was 12. And how do I know? Well, I counted the rings. Counted rings. Okay. And we'll get back to what else do these rings show in just a little bit. So what you might be noticing here is that if you look, this ring, for instance, right here, that distance is much greater than that distance right here, or this one right here. And a question might be occurring to you like, well, maybe you never thought of it before. I hadn't until I started this, was why aren't the rings the same size? Okay, so let's head back to our slideshow here. And okay, and so what else did we notice? Well, we noticed that the rings weren't exactly the same size. We also note a little scarring in here. So I don't know if this was a forest fire or another tree had leaned up against this. Somehow there's a little bit of damage here. So there's a lot we can learn about trees by looking at the rings and the features around them. What we can see here is that, like we said, is that not all the rings are the same size. And that's shown here with some of these smaller rings here, a couple smaller ones here, and then a much larger ring here. And what scientists have discovered is that the better the growing conditions, the larger the ring. So right here in this one, there is a big ring, which represents really good growing conditions. Whereas these smaller rings, it just didn't, the conditions weren't right. The temperature wasn't right. The rainfall, nutrients, anything wasn't optimal for this tree. So those years, it only grew a little bit, and it's marked by these smaller rings. So we know that we can look back at a tree and we can determine what were the growing conditions in that area based on the size of the rings. Okay, so we'll come back to that in just a sec. So let's go back to our lecture guide. And here we are heading back to our lecture guide. And what else did we notice about these rings? Well, they're not all the same size. Not all the same size. And what we learned is they're not always the same size because these were good growing conditions. And these right here, let's just use this ring right there, were harsh or not as good growing conditions. Okay. So what makes them different sizes? I would say different growing conditions that year. Okay. So what this then provides us with is all of the trees, the growing conditions were happening in that local environment. So all of the trees around there were experiencing the same growing conditions. And what this pattern can be is almost like a signature for a period of time where one year there might have been really good growing conditions, then 2 years where they were poor growing conditions, then another 4 where it was good. And this becomes a signature that's locked into the tree. And scientists can go back in time and see what were the conditions like a long time ago. Okay. So let's go back to our presentation here. Okay. So moving ahead here. So these ring signatures, so this signature of these represent historic conditions, but all the trees in that area had those conditions. And one thing that's really interesting is that not all of the trees die at the same time or are cut down at the same time. So for instance, what we're looking at here is maybe one tree that was cut down in 2013. And if we count the rings back, I can't count all these right here, but we'll believe them here. It goes all the way back to 1924. Well, you can see this pattern is almost like a barcode in there. And another tree from the same area might have been cut down and preserved. Either it didn't rot or a board was used for it to build the house. And in that board, you can still see these rings and you can see this very unique signature and you can match it up with the younger tree, this one that was cut down in 2013. And you can match up these years right here and start from 1924 and then count back to 1871. Then you can find another tree from that same area and match up this portion of the barcode of the rings of the tree and now count back to 1798. And if you imagine you had trees that were really old, if you had trees that were hundreds of years old or 1,000 years old, and you had another tree that had fallen down 1,000 years ago, hundreds of years ago, next to it, that hadn't rotted, so you could still see this the rings. And there's certain conditions, especially in the White Mountains of California, where the conditions almost, it's called a petrified forest, so that when the trees fall down, they don't rot because of the conditions in that area. And you can string together these barcodes very far back. And here, this has been used for archaeology, for climate research. And here we can see from 1990 all the way back, you could string it back to the year 800. And this is another example of this, what's called cross dating. So you have a modern tree, a very old tree, and maybe a plank or a board used in a very old structure, a historical site. And archaeologists have been using this for years. And even folks that are interested in the history of a house, right? It might not be archaeology, it might not be thousands of years old, but it might be hundreds of years old. And you're trying to determine what year the house was built. If the wood for the house was found, was used from the same area, you can use this bridging, this what's called dendrochronology, of matching up these barcodes of trees, and you can go very far back. In fact, now, if like the sequoia here, this tree is very old. So you can see here, this tree was cut down in 1930. And if I can see all the way back, I believe this is the year, that is about 1200. This is, I can't read that, but maybe it's the year 900 AD. So this tree was around 1,000 years old. And so imagine if you had many of these trees in an area that were each 1,800 years old, and you strung these trees back, and you found different fallen trees from the same area. And a place where this happens is this where these bristlecone pines live, these trees that are 2,000 to 5,000 years old. And a group of researchers from the University of Arizona have been studying this for years, and they've managed to string back a series of rings with this unique barcode, and they've been able to string it back almost 10,000 years. So simply by counting the rings of the tree and knowing that those rings have a unique signature in them, and then matching them up with younger trees or older trees in the other direction, scientists have been able to determine the age of that this forest, the trees they have found, strings together and represents 10,000 years of history. So simply by counting rings, we know that the Earth is at least 10,000 years old, just simply based on the trees we can find in one area. And there's been a couple investigations in various places, and these bristlecone pine trees date back to 6,700 BC, which is, of course, that's older than Archbishop Ussher had predicted using dates in the Bible. And a group in Germany has found an oak and pine tree chronology using the same methods in Germany that dates back to 461 BC. So at the time of publication, this was over 12,000 years old. So simply by counting rings, every year this happens, and matching those up and really looking carefully at them, we know that the Earth is at least 10 to 12,000 years old from there. So I want to just show this in our lecture guide here. And I'm going to start this up really quick here. And back to here. So the question is, why are these sections of wood matched up like this? Well, the reason we said is that they are matched up by unique, or like what we could call their ring signatures. And this is almost like sort of like a barcode for a particular time span. Let's call it that, time span. So if you get enough of these, it's really unique. You'd never have one where, you know, one year it's double the next year, and then it's 0.8, 0.7. They match these up, and even trees might grow more or less, but the relative growth will be the same for all the trees in that area. And scientists have found that this is a really unique signature that you can match up older and older trees. So how long have rings been traced back in any single location? So approximately 12,000 years. That was a place in Germany. In California, they've done it over 10,000 years. Okay. And so now we get a chance to sort of match up some of our own here. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to cut this one out here, sample one. I want to demonstrate this really quickly here. So I'm going to copy that there. Okay. And now I'm going to cut this one out and paste it here. And what I want to show you is I'm looking for where these match up. And I think I see a spot. Do you see that right there? Oops, I need to bring this down just a little bit so that it all fits. But I hope you see that right here, I get this like single and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a space and a single and another single. So I'm seeing these match up a little bit here. And now I want to take a look at sample 3 here. Copy and paste that one in. And I'm looking for where I can find the signature to match back up. And I think I might have it. Oh, this needs to be just a little bit bigger, I think. I think I might have it like right there. Do you see that? And I need to make this just slightly bigger so that it matches up. And I think I have it right there matched up now. Yes. And you can see that in sample 3 here, it barely has this fourth, that ring right there, which is the newest growth on that part right there. And then finally, we have sample 4 right here, and maybe this is from some historical building. And now we want to add that one here. And let's see if we can find a place where this might match up. I'm liking like right, that doesn't look right. Oh, what about that right there? And this one is maybe a little bit bigger. So I need to kind of make sure that it's the right size here. And I think that looks pretty good, right? So I have, I have that matched up in this little barcode matched up right there. And then I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. So now if I count this, this was 1993 here, 1993. So this is 90. So let's count. This is 92, 91, 90, 89. This is 1988. And then we can go from there. This is 88 to here. And this is also right here is 1988. So then we go 87, 86, 85, 84, 83, 82, 81, 80, 79, 78, 77, 76, 75, 74, 73, 72, 71, 70. It's almost matched up right there. 1970. And then we can go 69, 68, 67, 66, 65, 64, 63, 62, 61, 60, 59, 58, 57, 56, 55, 54, 53, 52, 51, 1950, 1949, 1948, 47, 46, 45, 44, 43. So 1943. So from these 4 samples right here, matching up those barcodes, we as the scientists were able to trace this back to 1943. All right. So you're going to get a chance to practice a little bit of this, you're actually going to get a chance to be quizzed on it. So hopefully you understand how to match these signatures in these trees up. And I should reiterate that this represents the middle of the tree right here, the pith. This is the middle. Hope you see that. And this is the bark over here, right? This is the bark of the tree. And so you could imagine we're looking kind of sideways at it instead of up top as the rings of the tree. Okay. So let's stop right there. Let's come back over here and share our, and so we did this, we were able to trace this back, we think, to about 1943 by lining up these different rings in this tree. And this is more like what I was saying, if you kind of did a core into a tree and then pulled it out, you would see those rings as little lines. Okay, so let me move this right here. It's kind of, what can tree rings tell us about history? Well, we can determine the number of years a tree was alive by counting its rings. Depending on the conditions, rings will be different sizes in different years. We learned about that. This will happen to all the trees in that area. This pattern is a signature or a barcode that can be used to match up different trees. Using this pattern and fallen trees that haven't rotted, we can count back many, many years. And we can count tree rings back in multiple locations to over 10,000 years. So we've known, simply by counting rings, we've established a youngest the Earth could possibly be, is about 10,000 years. And as we move on with this, we're going to learn more modern techniques that take this rings and confirm what we see in rings and then extend it even farther. So that was just our beginning unit. Interesting that this evolution unit, we're starting with trees and counting rings, something you all probably know a little bit about. So look forward to seeing you in the next session, and I hope this was interesting to you all. All right, bye-bye.